So, welcome everybody. We are back with yet another masterclass, and our guest for today, let me bring up her name there, Veronica Scott. Very happy to have you on board, Veronica. For you, it's very early in the day. It is 6:30, something like that, in Denver, Colorado. Oh,
Correct,
wow.
correct, yes.
Yep. Not being a morning person myself, I always admire all those people who get up that early. So, but to
Yeah.
all of you in the audience, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you are. As usual, we you know it. Some of them are already doing it here. Let us know that you are in the call. Let us know where you are from, so that we have some idea of who's in the house here. Uh, but yeah, the biggest thing here is okay. Helen is saying that you're hearing an echo. I will check on that, Helen, in a little while. Um, but the biggest thing here is, guys, let's make this an interactive session as much as possible. It's not a regular masterclass where Veronica has a lot of slides and a lot of videos to show you. We will talk about the topic, but she loves to be interrupted as much as possible with your questions. So bring on your questions as much as possible during the talk. We'll interrupt her presentation if the question is there, or ask them at the end during our regular Q&A. But let's make this as interactive as possible. So the topic for today with Veronica is coaching youth in different cultures. And why did I approach Veronica about this? Because well, we go way back. We've met a couple of years ago in Belgium when she was playing hockey for my club Antwerp, and coaching youth at my club. So Veronica is originally from Australia, played and coached in Australia, played and coached in Belgium, and some 10 years ago made the move to the US, where she's now the director of field hockey at the uh, Colorado Academy. That's
Yes.
the right one. So you have an experience in very different hockey cultures and coaching youth in different hockey cultures. So I was wondering about all those differences and what we can learn from each other. So Veronica, the show is all yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Ants. It's great to be here. Yes, as you said, I've done some traveling and I've been really fortunate in my life to have the ability to explore different cultures and really live in different countries around the world, predominantly. So I grew up in Australia, spent some time, probably nearly 10 years in Belgium, living in Antwerp, playing over there and coaching. And then I came across to the United States. Initially, I came on a whim and a bit of a request from somebody I'd met in the when I was coaching in Belgium. Her daughter was playing over here and so forth. And then eventually I did come over and had some other connections and so forth. So I explored a little bit of the college piece, which is really when we look at the differences between our nations. Belgium and Australia tend to have the basis as being a club environment. So we have that great social element of the clubs. The clubs sort of drive a lot of our playing and what opportunities are provided. Definitely in Australia, there's also a school context to it. However, nothing like the United States. The United States is really driven by the colleges. And the biggest difference I found was, so I went and explored the colleges for about 2 years. I went in and out of doing the camps, and I did work for one college for one season. And I realized I actually felt that there was something missing, and predominantly what was missing was the youth education piece with uh, the way the college structure was. There was not a great deal of youth development happening. Everybody was sort of pushing to get to college. And I remember doing a workshop with the USA, one of the USA coaches at the time, and he was explaining how he was having these 18-year-old girls and he had to teach them how to hold the stick properly, like what the grip was and so forth. And And I'd had some people sort of request from me, would I be interested in doing any youth work here, because the youth development piece was missing. So I applied for a couple of jobs, ended up with one in Denver, Colorado, which was a bit random, but actually I did have a really good friend who was living here at the time. So it all sort of connected. And my experience with youth has really been predominantly sort of 12 to 18-year-olds. I did that sort of the U15, a little bit of the national team element in when I was in Belgium, but predominantly just the club. And then in Australia, of course, sort of floating with the club element. So from the cultural perspective, though, that's what's really interesting and I find fascinating is that and sorry, no, I should explain that that's mostly what I'm going to talk about today is that difference, but then also how what I've learned about the different cultures and coaching the youth, how then that will tie into who we are as coaches and our philosophy and the culture that then we bring to the team, and how our own potential culture from the national perspective can influence maybe how we coach. So the USA has been an interesting experience for me, predominantly because I miss anyway, that club element. And I find it quite fascinating when I speak to my colleagues, or I have a couple of coaches who I know who are working in the college system, they're American, grew up in this system, and now have been able to explore some of a European exposure, and they come back and they're quite fascinated, and they feel that we need to change a little bit how we do things in the United States, particularly because field hockey is a game on the East Coast. We have lots of numbers. However, out here in Colorado, our numbers aren't as great. And so to try and grow the game, how do we grow the game and promote this wonderful sport to our youth, and sort of competing a little bit with the other two high level and highly participant numbered sports of soccer and lacrosse out here, definitely in Colorado. So the biggest thing I find there going forward is as we grow up in the club culture in Europe and Australia, we have this exposure, I think, from a younger age. Maybe our parents have played hockey, or we're just around that environment. And we have this conversation here too with my colleagues to say, is that also potentially why the playing ability from Europe and Australia is potentially any better? Like, are we stronger players because we just grew up around it and in this environment? So if that's the case, how do we keep adult retention in the United States if we don't have the clubs? So you have a bunch of small clubs, and clubs exist in the United States. And I should explain this, sorry. The clubs exist in the United States. It's actually a pipeline from a recruiting purpose, not from the social piece as we have in Europe and Australia. And so I know in Europe and Australia, well, my belief is that our clubs are more or less almost non-profit. Yes, they do charge their members and so forth, but that really is to maintain a clubhouse, maintain the fields, and to give back to their athletes and their members. However, in the United States, a club's main purpose is really driven almost from the parents to provide an opportunity for their athletes to get recruited into college. So college really is the end game. And that's where it gets a little sad, because we have all these top athletes who are finished playing at maybe 23 years of age. And when you look at the national teams internationally, that average age is a little bit more higher than 23, obviously. So keeping the girls in the game when they don't have a regular competition base is also hard on a high level. But if we go back to the youth, how do we generate and recreate maybe a club environment that's going to retain athletes? And my love for the sport really is to try and help. So I'm just reading a comment. Yeah, they are a business. That's exactly right. They really are a business. And that's why they're set up. But that business is to get kids recruited into college. And one of my American friends, who's also coaching at a high level, she was sort of explaining it when she grew up, because I asked the question, why are kids not wanting to play for the United States? Like, why is that not an end goal? Yes, we want to play for fun, and that's my biggest one of my biggest pieces as a coach, is if we can please encourage the lifelong learning and lifelong enjoyment of a sport. I want everybody to be, if we can all be playing when we're 80 years old, isn't that fantastic? How much we can give back and what we have to offer, but also just from our health and fitness perspective. Whereas these athletes here, and they're stopping at 23. And so this friend of mine, she was saying, it's when you're young, you aspire to go to college because that's the only way you're going to continue to play your sport outside of high school. And for me, that's one of the biggest differences. How do we perhaps make a change in that regard? So I have a couple of friends. I have a good friend here who's doing an amazing job with a club, and she has recruited a bunch of adults. Basically, she put it out into the community to say, hey, does anybody want to potentially play adult league? Yes, it's a money generator for her, but also for her to play. I mean, she's in her late 20s and she hasn't been able to play the game for the last couple of years because she's left college. So she's managed to get close to 250 people just from our community to jump in and play. And then now they're starting to give back. They're starting to coach, which is awesome. So yeah, that's really the biggest piece between those three nations, is that club environment as opposed to the college-driven element. The positive on the American side, though, is that the United States takes coaching seriously. It's considered a career here. So I can tell people quite happily that I'm a coach. And they respect me. We have a bit of chat about it. If I go back to Australia and people say, well, what are you doing? And I'm coaching, they look at me sideways going, well, what else do you do? Because that's a volunteer position in Australia, unless you're doing the high level. So I find anyway, because I love coaching, so I'm in the right place for me, that the United States, aside from being a great country to live in, that's why I'm here, but it does provide those really strong opportunities from a coach development perspective that I haven't really seen. I think the FIH is doing a great job in trying to help internationally, but the United States, that's also what's ingrained in their culture. You can be a coach and be a coach. So going forward, then I wanted to know, or I started to explore, so how does my culture influence how I coach? And that was really evident for me when I first started here, because the American culture is very task and outcome driven. So for me, I grew up playing hockey for fun, and I ended up being okay at it. So I had some great opportunities, but it was all about the fun, the friendship, the challenges that we learned from field hockey as well. And sorry, I will throw that in there, that's the term over here is field hockey, so forgive me for the interchanging of the name, but it's playing for fun and the enjoyment, but all the things that we learned, being a great teammate, having responsibility, being accountable, those key elements. For me, I just love the game. And when I came here, this task orientated, outcome driven community where they were, well, we're going to play hockey to get our kids into college. And I've actually had some parents reach out to me to say, hey, look, this sport's growing, but I see it's busy and I see it's good on the East Coast. We're growing here. Do you think I can get my kid recruited? And I'm looking at her going, your child is 12 years old. Why are we having a conversation about recruitment? But for her, she's looking and going, well, my other daughter played soccer and it's becoming really intense. The time commitment for soccer is intense. And also we have limited opportunities if we're not living in certain places that are more highly regarded. We're not going to get into college for playing soccer. And I was a bit baffled, because that would never have occurred to me that we would play a sport for an end result such as going to college, particularly in Belgium and Australia, where your sporting ability does nothing to help you get into a college it's all academic driven. So here to think, okay, that sport can help get them into college, but then we're now starting to put our kids into a sport because we feel that it can get them into a college position. Again, I was a bit baffled by it. But going back to, oh, now I've lost my train of thought, but going back to that piece in terms of, okay, how does that now relate to my culture? And what am I bringing to this team? So I step in to be the new coach here, and I'm working with 15 to 18-year-olds. And all of a sudden I'm realizing they're looking at me oddly because I'm going to play every kid. So I have a roster of 18 players, and I'm rotating them in. And after I think the second game, my athletic director, and fantastic human being, he is not results driven person, he is about character development. So he was just curious, going, you rotate your athletes a lot, like these girls are rotating in. He said, are your starting 11 not strong enough? And I was like, well, first of all, I don't understand the term starting 11, because we never were so driven about only having your best 11. Of course you would start maybe with your top players on the pitch, but your players on the bench have a value. And if they're not given that experience and exposure to play, how do I hope for them to improve and get better? So, and I remember when I worked at one of the colleges, one of the coaches came to me and were talking about her sort of 13th, 14th athlete. And she was sort of saying, well, how do I get them better? And I said, well, they need to get on the field. And she said, well, they're not good enough to get on the field. And I was like, well, they're not that much different to maybe your 11th player, but your 11th girl is playing sort of nearly a whole game. And these kids, you're not, even in practice, you're not really giving them a chance. They're sort of seen as practice players. So we had this conversation because for me growing up, I mean, you're part of a team, you work hard, you get minutes on the field. And yes, some players will get more minutes than others, but it's a whole team environment and everybody has something to bring to the team. And I do recall
let me quickly interrupt you there, because we got a good question that ties in what you're talking about here now as well, from Helen de Zun from the Netherlands. So you mentioned parent. How was the difference in terms of parent in these three cultures?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'll be honest, because I haven't spent a lot of time back in Australia or Belgium in the last few years. So I'm curious myself to see how the parent involvement has changed. I was listening to a great podcast by the UNC, University of North Carolina, soccer coach Anson Dorrance the other day, and he was talking about when he goes into an athlete meeting, he said, I'm there with the athlete, but he said, I also know I'm there with the parent and maybe also the high school coach. The parent involvement is so intense here that you have to recognize it and know that the parents are going to be more involved than perhaps my generation. So maybe not even a cultural piece, maybe it's a generational piece. And
I guess that's one of the elements, but one of the things that a lot of the coaches in Europe will recognize, and you probably as well from your time here, is when coaches here have to deal with parents, and obviously we also have to deal with parents and when you're coaching youth, that's clear, and they are an important role. But the big message we always give these parents is, we're the coaches, you're the supporter. So be a fan, be a supporter of your kid, but don't get in between the real coaching stuff. Is that the same in the US?
Yeah, it's well, I have to say, we are at my school, we're really explicit about it. So we are required to have a parent meeting at the beginning of the season. So the parents, we can actually put a face to the name, so to speak, meet the parents, and I introduce my staff members. But in that meeting, there's also the expectations of the school. So, for example, every athlete at our school or the students at our school have to do so many athletic requirements. So we have to explain that, and we really talk to the parents about it. But we're also trying to get the athletes or the students themselves to be advocates for themselves. And so we request to parents, if the athlete comes home and has a problem, how can we help them best work it out on their own? So we're sort of challenging the parents to step aside, because I think that's not easy for a lot of parents. So we ask the kids to come to us with the problem. If they can't go directly to, I have 4 teams that I look after in the high school division. So I have 8 coaches. If they can't go to any of those coaches, then they could come to me. Or if they're one of my athletes and they find that they can't speak to me, then maybe they can go to my assistant. We have a really strong support network. But it is, dealing with parents is part of our life. And I definitely feel it's stronger here, because for some of these kids, there's higher stakes. So they're playing to get recruited. They're playing to improve. Parents spend a lot of money going to camps in the summer. They spend their time and energy trying to help their young one get recruited and get into college. So they feel the stakes are higher. Now, I know in Australia, definitely when we have some athletes who are trying to make a state team, parents might get a little bit more involved. And again, that's what they have, something they're aiming for. Their money and pressure, for sure. It is intense. And I do feel that something here in the United States, this sort of tunnel vision that creates this extra pressure on athletes. So for me, I try to see if I can remove that. But when dealing with parents, honesty, transparency, openness, that's all I can do. And I have to say to my parents, so the hardest part is during the team, when we're announcing the teams at the beginning of the season, and we sort of say, okay, we're going to announce the teams on a Thursday or a Wednesday afternoon, go home and sleep about it. We say, everybody, we're not going to talk for you for 24 hours. So you can email me all you like. I'm not going to read them and I'm not going to respond. And we sort of say that at the very beginning in our parent meeting, which happens at the start of the season. This is the selection process. You have to trust us. We honestly want the best for your child, and we want to put them in the best group that they're going to grow. So if you're not happy with the selection process, it's 24 hours, and then we can sit and we can chat and deal with it. Thankfully, we don't really have too many issues here where I am, but that constant, you have to be aware that parent pressure is there. And the other thing is too, if you can be, the more transparent you can be with the athlete, so that athlete feedback. Again, Anson Dorranson, he was saying they really use a lot of data. Now, I don't have the time, to be honest, to go through the data that's potentially required, but if we can use some sort of feedback and something objective that we can say to the athlete, this is your metrics, this is where you stand at the moment, and this is what you need. And I was actually talking to my boss the other day about it, saying we may start to get into the process of actually sending an email out, have the meeting with the athlete, and then sending the email out to the athlete and the parent to say, this is where you're at. If you're wanting to make the varsity team, these are your required, this is what you need to do basically over the summer. And we'll send that out to the parents, and the parents can sort of have a clear idea. But I have a fairly open personality, and I will say to the parents, you can come and talk to me after a game. So after the game for us, we bring the kids together. I said, you give us 10 minutes with the athletes. We have our debrief post-game. But I said, then I'm around. And if you have questions about the game or something that happened, I'm here. Come and get to know me, and let's form some sort of relationship with some barriers. I'm not going to be answering questions, though, on game day about why your kid didn't play. That's something we can schedule a meeting for. But again, I think because my philosophy and the culture that we've created in my program, thankfully, so far, we don't have many issues with parents questioning things. But again, definitely it's just they're there. They're part of our life, and so for me, it's okay forming relationships with them and seeing where they come from, ask them some questions and get to know them a little bit.
Yeah. Would you say that the parents in the US expect you to be more of a coach taking care of the individual needs of the individual players than of a team need?
It's I think that depends on the parents, because I definitely I have definitely a couple of parents from who with their they don't go to my school, their kids are in the club system, and we do small private sessions. That's the other thing here. I've never given so many private sessions as I have in the when back in Australia or Belgium. But there definitely is that focus. Hey, I need you to take care of my kid. Thankfully, within our team environment, because we really do emphasize and push the team, I feel that it's not as bad. So the parents know that we are doing the best for the team, and then the team has the results, and when the team has success, their athlete's going to have success. And it's interesting because last season we brought the team together at one stage, and we said, what when we're looking at playing time, because this it sort of came up saying, you know, who's playing and what are we doing, and a couple of the girls who I thought their parents actually may have questioned their reduced playing time, they were the ones who stood up and said, we're part of the team, and we want the team to win. So you need to put the best girls on the field when they need to be on the field. We trust you as coaches. Do what you need to do, and don't worry about if people don't play or not. And I was like, wow, that's good. We're getting through with our cultural piece too, then, to say we're all here together, and they trust us then to know if they're worthy of getting on the field, they're going to get on the field.
Yeah.
And usually.
Yeah. You mentioned that you've never done so much individual work with one-on-one with players as you have in the US. That is something. Okay, it's being done here in Europe as well, obviously, and especially in the UK, I guess. But do you think that it really adds that much more value to work in a one-on-one with a player, or make him or her a better team player by working with the team in general?
I don't. And my first few years here, I actually didn't. I said no. People would approach me, and I said no. And then possibly maybe 3 years ago, well, maybe it was also during COVID. That's when it maybe really started. That then I was around more, and so I had more time and availability. So I would accept when people were requesting. But at the same time, I sort of did it for a couple of months, and I was speaking to a really good friend of mine who's actually English, and we sat down and we said, what's the added value for these kids from coming in for a one-on-one session? I mean, unless someone really needs a skill, like a technical refinement. So I worked with one kid. She was about to go off to college. Her hit wasn't very good, and you realize in the course of your team-orientated practices, maybe you don't get to refine and have that quality time with everybody. So for her, 30 minutes, we just came out one afternoon, 30 minutes, corrected the hit, worked on it. And then I met up with her a couple of other times in a larger group setting, once we'd nailed just the small little tweaks we needed to do, and then she's fine. But we agree. We've sort of started saying to people now, I'm not going to do one-on-ones, three to four, and then you have someone passing to you, you're working with as you said, the team element. But the number's still small enough that we can do the corrections that are needed. Because I totally agree. I don't see that much added value on paying for a private coach 1v1.
No, I guess the exception is what you mentioned there, is if someone needs almost very specific technical skill or something like that. But no, I'm happy to see the comment here from Jennifer, one of your colleague coaches from the US. Because I think this is something that is very mutual to all of the cultures, both the Australian or the European one or the American one. It's great what your player said about putting the team first, and sometimes parents are on the same page, and then that's when it gets frustrating. I think that is a frustration that a lot of coaches share, whether you're in Europe or in the US. Huh?
I agree. And I think, honestly, if we can continue to educate the athlete, and if the athlete knows this is the game plan, this is what's going on, this is your role, and that's something my boss has been really great in teaching me, actually, is to be explicit. We sort of evaluate the girls, and you get to know them. We have a 4-year changeover, so we'll have an athlete coming in as a freshman, and so there's 4 years of high school here, so year 9, 10, 11, and 12. So maybe you'll get an athlete coming to your program when they're in year 9. If they're a really strong athlete, they might make your varsity team, or when they're in year 10, maybe they make the varsity team. But you can get to know your athletes, and then you can assign them a role. So when you're in the team together, within the sort of the first week, well, for me, within sort of the first week, I want to say, okay, this is our team, this is sort of our playing style, and so forth. But then you can talk to athletes about what they bring to the team and give them some sense of confidence from that. So maybe you have an athlete who's a really great communicator, and she could be the coach on the field. Her skills maybe not there yet, but you can talk to her and say, when you're on the sideline and you see something, and you can share your knowledge about what you see with your teammates. So instead of just sitting there cheering on, maybe you can help explain what you see to your teammates. And then when you're on the field, that's one of your key roles. And have the girls also, we do a little exercise at the beginning of the year where they sort of make a comment on everybody. This is actually something I learned from a sports psych in Belgium, and we had a big list, all the names on, and you came and wrote down beside someone's name what you felt they brought to the team, and then I read them as well, and then you sort of say, okay, well that we see that player there, everybody, maybe she's got fantastic stick handling and she's our goal scorer or something. Yep, that's in it. But what else can she bring? And so we sort of help the girls to find out what can we bring to the team, and then if they know what they're bringing to the team, it helps them sort of have that. Because I think the problem is the parent student or the parent athlete conversation in the car ride home. They get in the car and mum or dad, why didn't you play well, or you didn't do this, or you didn't do that, or that's happening, or whatever. And I think if we can educate our athletes, they hop in the car and then they can kind of stand up for themselves and say, you know what, no, this is what we were doing, and that was our play, or so forth. And over the years, I've had conversations, and that's why I'm okay with parents coming to me after a game, because they might have a genuine question going, we were always playing on the left. What was going on today, or something? And a lot of our parents don't really know much about field hockey, so that's kind of my a great place for me too, to be able to help educate them about our great game. But it's empowering or educating the athletes to be able to have that challenging conversation with their parents, to go, you know what, it's okay. And then when the parents come to me, they hear it from me as well, going, well, this is actually, maybe this is what our outcome or what our game plan was for the day. But
Absolutely. Yeah,
I
that's
do.
also something that I recognize that also from a parent kids and a coach to parent kids in Europe. Same situation. Sometimes you have to teach the kids to stand up against their parents during that car ride home.
Exactly, and it's tough. I do feel for these kids, and I think a lot of parents perhaps live vicariously through their kids also, but they just out of love, they want the best for their child, and they're going to try and do whatever they can to create that, whether it's paying money or driving them places, whatever they need to do. So it's you have to walk tenderly on it and be able to support the athlete, and again have those conversations with the parents if need be.
Question from Helen from the Netherlands again as well. Do you think that the club culture in Australia is comparable with the one here in Europe, or what are the differences there that you recognized?
The biggest thing I found when I went to Europe was the fact that each club has their own clubhouse. So when I remember first coming to Royal Antwerp, going, oh my, I loved it because it's a family. You're there, you're all together, and that's kind of your second home. In Australia, we have a group of clubs usually come together to form an association, and then from that association, you share fields and facility. And on the positive, because I mean, for me growing up, I loved it because I then had really good friends from other clubs and other teams that I saw on a regular basis. And it was easy for us too, because as in Australia, such a large country in terms of the geographics, that in Toowoomba, my hometown, we had 5 or 6 clubs. You have the shared facilities, but you also then are training together to represent Toowoomba. So therefore, you meet your other teammates. They're all around you all the time as well. Maybe I play for Northern Suburbs. I have practice on a Monday night, and from 6 till 7, and then my really good friend Jules, she plays for Red Lions. They come on the field from 7 till 8, and so we have that little connection. Or you have your Toowoomba practices at a different time where you all come together. So it makes that unity happen really easily. And then you're in your team Toowoomba, you're practicing together, then you go away and compete against your other cities and so forth. So that aspect is positive, but I really loved Belgium and the homeliness and that social piece that each individual club can offer.
Yeah, but also from the coaching philosophy part of it, do you see the differences between Australia? What are the differences that you notice between Australia and Europe, or Australia versus the US, for example?
So one of my, I threw this question out to a few of my friends actually, and one of them came back straight away. I said, "What did you notice the difference about moving to Belgium?" And he said a couple of different things. The first was a little bit maybe the social slash drinking culture that happens at a top level. So in Australia, if you're representing your state or the national team, you probably your diet is focused on a lot more. And in whereas in Belgium it's seen quite okay, and I think it's changing slightly. I know when I was there, so this was 2012, and we would sort of question going, okay, why all these guys, they're training so hard, but gee, they can also drink so well. And the foreigners, we would sort of question this, particularly the Aussies. My Argentinian friend said it was a little bit more normal for them, but that type of culture existed. And the other thing also was in Australia, because we are such a strong sporting nation. When you represent your country or your state, it has status. And when I was in Belgium, playing a sport was respected, but it wasn't a status thing. And so therefore, I know a couple of the guys, for example, when they were on the Belgium team, they struggled because they still had to get their university degree done. So they had their study, they had their family commitments. And the family commitments often included a set family vacation or a holiday that may actually happen in field hockey season. Whereas in Australia, that does not happen. If you are signed on to a team, first of all, we don't the family obligation piece wasn't as strong. But if you're signed on to your team, then you're committed to your team, and you don't take a holiday in the middle of a season. Like you're there for the duration. Um, in the United States, one of my US friends actually is over there playing, and he sort of said similar. Like he said, you sort of struggle because you have a different level of intensity and focus from the various athletes. And I guess in Belgium too, it is a little status to play in the Heron one, but um, yeah, it's but being that fully committed, and particularly if you're at college, you can't say, well, I'm missing today to come to practice because actually I have to go to school. Whereas in Australia, people would say, oh, I don't need to go to college today to study because I'll just do it at home because I have a practice. And I know that in a couple of my national team friends back in the day, our university was awesome, and they would say, hey, if you have to go away, if you've got an international tournament, then just reduce your workload, take off a couple of subjects, and go and be an Australian athlete. Whereas in Belgium, that would not happen. I remember trying to get my team to have the girls to have a day off school slash college university, to go to Ireland for a team bonding trip, and we wanted to leave on the Thursday night. And so many of them couldn't take the Friday off because that was their commitment. Was not only was it commitment, but also the university would take a registration of who's there or who's not there.
Yeah,
So
not
that
only
that kind
colleges and university, but also the parents here. Huh?
yes, yeah, that thought of taking it. What do you mean you're taking a day off? Whereas in America, it's a little more like Australia. If you're, I know we have a lot of athletes who will often miss them for Mondays and Fridays because they're going off to a recruiting tournament. And the amount of travel that these kids do is crazy. I had a friend who told me, I think they spent in a 4 or maybe 5 years, no, 4 year high school educational piece, they spent around $100,000 on camps and recruitment sort of orientated expenses, helping their kid play their sport. And for me, it's so
Wouldn't it
baffling.
be easier to just pay for college?
Well, you would think, yes, except for the college is probably
Yeah.
$100,000 a year. Like
Yeah.
it's so intense. But and I was just talking to some parents last night, actually, about what was coming up and what their kids have to miss, and it's hard because this interchange of seasons too. So we have athletes at the moment who are in their spring sports, so they're playing lacrosse or field hockey. Oh no, sorry, lacrosse or soccer, and then we try not to interfere. So the club coaches are really good here, and we all have this nice relationship. So they've said, you know what, we're going to reduce the amount of practice we have in the spring to allow these girls to play their spring sports. But there's also these recruitment tournaments we need to get these kids to. So actually, they're going to have to miss a weekend here and there. And then it's having the conversation with their school coaches. And the same happens for me. And we might be in hockey season, and then I'll have kids going, you know, we're out. We have to go to a lacrosse tournament. And a couple of years ago, we had our championship game happen to be on a Monday. And it was just not normal. Just this what happened this particular year. Well, the weekend, I had about 6 of my best athletes play a lacrosse tournament, and they thought it was perfectly fine that they could manage it. Well, we lose the championship game because of so many unforced errors because these kids are exhausted. And that's just something we are constantly competing with to say, we want the kids to play multiple sports. That's important. But how do we then encourage other sports to say, can we just stick in your season? Let's allow these kids to enjoy the season of sport that they're playing.
How do you manage,
Yeah.
especially from the US perspective here, how do you manage that balance, not only between different sports, because usually the different sports will be more or less in different times of the year, probably with some overlap, but also the balance between the business style clubs who are there making their money from getting the players into the recruitment program for certain colleges, and you guys at high schools, yeah, more or less doing the same thing, but from another point of view. How do you manage
Yeah.
that balance between the club business and the high school hockey?
It is tough. I mean, where we are, we have really good relationships. We only have a couple of clubs, and one of them just bought out the other one, and now maybe we have 4 clubs. And those club owners love the sport and understand the value of playing other sports. So in our sport, it's a little easier because we have good relationships with each other. So we have 15 schools that play in our league, or now we're 16. We've added 16 schools and maybe 4 clubs. And of those clubs, 2 of the club owners also coach at high school. And so we're able to have a little bit better communication and relationship style with our club coaches. And actually, one of our club coaches last year, she threw out all these new trainings that were happening during the season. And a couple of us were able to go to her and say, I don't know that the kids are going to manage this, but also we can't afford having our kids go, half the kids maybe going off to club coaching when they need to be at school to meet their school requirement, but also the team element. And she was really good in terms of changing it and so forth. The biggest one is probably the intersport rivalry. So as I said here, our challenges are with lacrosse and soccer. And even to the point, even soccer within its own game, I have athletes who play club soccer and who have been told by their club soccer they are not allowed to play for their schools because they don't want any other interference with other coaching. And then the club soccer is a machine. It really is a big machine, and it runs all year round. And we have, I mean, I just encountered the other day, I had some middle school, so 8th graders, who said we cannot play our school club soccer game because we have to go to club soccer practice. And if we don't go to club soccer practice, then we might miss out on making our travel team. Or if we make the travel team and we go, we may get less minutes. And now if mum and dad are paying thousands of dollars for me to be in this club soccer team, I need to make sure I attend all my club soccer practices to get value for my parents spending this money. It's like, I can't believe you're like eighth grade, so maybe 12 years old, and that's your thought pattern.
Yeah,
Going, just
that's
play the
yeah.
game because you love it. So it's that competition is really strong, just between clubs and between sports. It's difficult to manage. It really is.
Yeah. Helen took one of the questions out of my mouth again. So, where do you start to change such a system? And let me add to that: do we need to change it? Should we change
Yeah.
it?
I mean, this is again that cultural piece, isn't it? Because who am I to come into someone else's home and say, "Hey, I don't like that rug. You need to throw it out." Because and when I talk to a lot of people, when I talk to my American friends, this is their culture and this is what they're used to. Um, so I don't touch the other sports. It's what happens. All I can do is to set the understanding and the expectation on my sport and my teams. So when I have my parent meeting at the beginning of the season, we go through my philosophy. And and that's something I encourage every coach to look at. And it's one of the really big benefits I have found about coming to a country that honors coaches as a career is the educational piece. So I challenge coaches to say, okay, yes, it is about what more you can add. So find your philosophy, get set with who you are, what are your values, have your philosophy set, and then you can explain that philosophy to your parents. So if I talk to my parents about my philosophy, which is basically, I love, I coach for the love of the game and everything it can bring for the kids or for anybody, and that being accountable, teammanship, we can list all those attributes. So when I am then with my parents at the parent meeting, we have the conversation. I know your kids play lacrosse. I would love it if we can stick to the game in season. If you do need to play, and particularly for my year 11ers or 11th graders, where they're in a big recruiting phase, there's a lot that they have to do in the field hockey season in terms of travel to get seen. It's just how it works here in terms of the timing of when colleges can go. So sorry, I'm just reading that, Jennifer. Yes, exactly. I think hockey is, and that's what I love about our sport. We do have, our culture is different, and we would never tell somebody that not to play for their school. And I think that comes into it. So you can be strong on your values, be strong on who you are, be strong on your own philosophy, share that philosophy, share those values. Not everyone's going to agree with it. That's fine. Parents don't have to. But if you can have the kids buy in, and the kids buy in, and then the kids can start to be the ones who say, you know what, can I not leave school on Friday because I have a game, and I will make the lacrosse tournament on Saturday, mum and dad, but I'm leaving Friday night. And have those, again, sort of challenge your kids to find out what's true for them and be accountable. And we talk about being accountable a lot in my program. And what does that actually look like? How am I being accountable? Not just on the field by working hard, but all the other things I'm doing. And that might go on the edge, the the nutritional piece and taking care of my body and so forth and so forth, but also just being a good teammate. What does that look like? And
Hmm.
so if we can be strong with that, then we can help with our athletes understand, and then we can also help our parents understand. So I think that education piece is, for me, really key. And the more I am transparent and can talk to the parents, um, and and yes, yeah, exactly, our awareness, self-regulation, it that definitely helps. But I don't know in this country that we will ever change. Um, Realistically, honestly, I can't change other sports, but all I can do is to build our positive hockey culture. And I want kids to love hockey so much they're going to end up saying, "You know what? I'm in hockey season, Mum. I'm playing hockey. Like I'm not going to go and do something else." And I think that's for me all we could do. And I've seen the change, and we're working really hard. And I have this amazing support staff, and now we have some great club coaches who we have kids who are doing that, who are saying, "You know what? I'm not going to go away in my season." But then now I'm educating them too to say, okay, when you're in soccer season and you have a field hockey tournament to go to, let's have the conversation first and foremost at the beginning of the season. Have that conversation with your coach, your soccer coach, and see what you can work out. Because I don't like it being done to us, and so we shouldn't also then do it to others.
Hmm.
Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
Absolutely. Um, from a different perspective, how do you experience the differences of coaching the current generation or the Gen Z? Because you haven't done that generation in Europe or Australia, have not had that experience. But yeah, I guess there are a lot of similarities also between Gen Z in Europe or in the US, and it is, from my experience, very different than from
Yes.
coaching the previous generations. What are some of the lessons that you've learned from that specific generation there?
Um, definitely different. And so again, the transparency. And I actually spoke to a couple of 14 year olds about this last night, and we talked, because I said, for me it's that transparency. Athletes have, our youth now, they have access to lots of knowledge and lots of information, and you have to be who you are with them as well. I think that's what they expect. But if you try and do something or be something or tell them something, they're going to find out the truth quickly because they have access to it. um, so there's no sort of faking it, really. and and I really do believe that you can show your vulnerability to them. You can be yourself, a lot more, of course, with the boundaries, because you have to know where they are in terms of just, not crossing boundaries, of course. But so being transparent is definitely one. The other piece is they're extremely social. This group is so social, and not just on the social media and everything else, but just in general. Um, and we find, so we have a little way we run practice, that the kids come out of school at 3:45, or they're expected to be on the field at 3:45, but they don't start until 4 o'clock. So we give them 3:45 till 4 to change their shoes, whatever they need to do, have a little chat. And then our warm up time, also, we allow them, and we have a set warm up piece. They can chat and they can talk, and then we pull them in. So they've had a good 20 minutes, maybe 25, 30 minutes by this stage. Then we pull them in, and then we reset and we go. But it's, so allowing for that social element, because it's true and it's real. They want that transparency. They want the honesty as well. You don't need to sugarcoat things as much with them, and have time that they can get off task quite easily. So their focus element, and I guess that's just how their brains are sort of working it now with everything they have going on. So it's also finding some tools to help them refocus. And we try not to use any sort of punishments in our practices. And this sort of something that was instigated by my strength and conditioning coach, because he would walk around the fields and see people, or see coaches having kids do push-ups or run some sprints if they're not focused. And he said, well, that just disencourages them, if that's a word, to not enjoy doing physical training, which is also a necessity for being a good athlete. So he said he wants to change that conditioning piece. So we don't want to have athletes thinking, oh, well, I've going and doing push-ups, I must have been bad. So he said, let's not give push-ups as a punishment, but challenge yourself as a coach. How else can you have your athletes refocus? And that piece I find I have to do more of with this generation. They need a little bit more bringing in. So if we do an exercise and it's gone all pear-shaped and it's not what you wanted, instead of the thing is to, yep, we'll do a push-up or run a lap or something, it's okay, time out, go get a drink, walk away from the activity, and then refocus and come back. If you try to keep them in the activity, sometimes it's not as easy as it was with maybe 10 years ago when I was coaching. So I find now, okay, we stop, either or separate them into a couple of groups, come back with the goal. What are we actually trying to achieve? Have we achieved it? No, we haven't. Then what do we need to change? What do we need to work on in order to achieve it? And often you give them the platform, they're going to come back and someone will have the answer going, well, we're not focused, or we're talking too much, or we're not involved. They know, and so you give them that scope. The other thing too with this group, they want time for specifics. So they're so used to being multitasking everything. It's great if they can just have a few moments, even if it's 5 minutes of practice, to say, go and work on some drags or pulls or hits or whatever. Like, have some time out instead of it just being constant. Like our practices are an hour and a half. And instead of just that constant me talking and directing, sometimes they like to be really self-driven. And that's evident also in our warm-ups. I'm so used to, in my day, and 10 years ago when I was last in Belgium or in Australia, we're very regimented. So we had a regimented warm-up. And I laughed last year because I thought we had a fairly good warm-up, and the kids came up to us halfway through the season saying, we're really bored with our warm-up. Can we just do something different? And so my assistant and I looked at each other and said, sure, okay, show us what you want to do. And we gave them a practice to put together a new warm-up. And so allowing them to take control, have that autonomous aspect about what they want to learn, I think is also important. So be authentic yourself, be transparent. It's okay. Allow them to be social, because they are. Allow them to have some time so they're not always multitasking, and allow them to take some control. I definitely think that's helped us a lot.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. Again, let me put a twist to this. Talking about competitive level. Okay, I'm very much in the European frame of mind. So for me, the top is there to serve the recreational part of the game, not vice versa. But I understand in different cultures that might be different. But then I am so curious about the fact that in the US, where it is about the high competitive level, because that will get you into the college. But if you take it one step further to the international level, as you mentioned before, your players, your best players, or the bulk of your players, will stop playing competitive hockey at the age of 22, 23 when they finish their college. In our system, we recognize that a player will never be a constant top level player at the best of their abilities for 100% of the time until they reach the age of 22, 23. So it's only then that the next step is achieved. At the age group between 22 and 25, you become constant at the highest level. What is the challenge then for, if you're looking at this from an international competitive level? Yeah, how do you get players to that level?
I don't know. That's exactly right. And I brought this up a few years ago with one of my friends who was in the national squad, and she said at that time there were, I think, 40 girls in the squad. And she said all they can do is play scrimmages or games against each other. And that sort of adage, you get better by playing with better people. But what happens when what happens with your better people? They sort of they have nowhere to go, and it's tough. And I think that's one of the things that the challenges that the USA national team faces, and also allowing colleges to release their athletes to be able to go and play for the USA team. I think there's sort of, I don't know all the ins and outs of all of this. It's just things that I've heard. But I asked the question to some people saying, why don't because our best players don't play for the United States, and they're not almost worried about playing for the United States. They're worried about what college they play for, and getting into a Division One school is the key thing for them. And so how does the US? I'll be curious, and I missed out on an opportunity. I was going to go and got invited to meet with David Passmore, the new USA coach, in May, but I'm not here, and I'll be really interested to see what he does and how he's able to make the changes that he needs to make, because I had an opportunity. So one of my closest friends is a 3-time Olympian, gold medalist, 3-time Olympian, and she was happened to be in America. I said, "Hey, do you want to come and run a camp for me?" And she said, "Love to come." And I was trying to promote it, and I was talking to the girls, and they were saying, "But what college did she play at? Did she play
Yeah.
at a Division One school?" I'm like, "She played for Australia, and she went to the Olympics." They go, "But what is that? What? She didn't play in college? How did she go? What does she do if she like?" They couldn't comprehend
Mm.
that they don't comprehend that we don't have the college system as they do, but B, that it almost was irrelevant to them that she was an Olympian, because for them their end goal is the college piece. And so
Mm.
now I have one athlete who we really working with to understand, and she understands the value, and her parents understand the value of playing for the United States, and she has potential capability of playing for the United States. So that's really exciting. And I think the youth pipeline, although that's also, and this is a whole other conversation, the youth pipeline's hard because they run it so differently. Again, it's a bit more of a user pay system. Yeah, Jennifer, that's exactly right. There is nowhere to play unless you go abroad, and and that's something we talk about here from the club perspective. If we can get the adults to play, and so
Mm.
we try and create a really strong, rec league almost with so when our college athletes come back, they can have an opportunity to keep playing. But yeah, you don't. And then you also said that then I don't even know the selection. If you're not at college, and this is a question one of my fathers is looking into actually, he's going, if my kid isn't at college, or she chooses to play another sport at college because she's a very good athlete, but she wants to play field hockey socially or recreationally, but how does she play it also competitively if she doesn't do 2 sports at college and get into the United States team? Like, what's the pathway? Where you have to be able to go to
Go to
these
Europe.
tournaments,
Go to Europe.
yeah, go to Europe or Australia and keep playing. But that's what's really sad.
Yeah,
It is
yeah.
really hard.
Mhm. And
So
a last question then maybe, and also a little bit of a sensitive topic, obviously, when it comes to hockey and the US, is a question from Helen here. So, what's the ratio in numbers of boys and girls in your college playing field hockey? I guess there is no ratio.
there is no ratio. Boys do not play in college, full stop. There isn't an option for them. We my first was my anyway, sometime here I had a Dutch family, and they had a wonderful boy who was 7th grade. So for 7th and 8th grade, so that's called our middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, they're allowed to play because it's not a sanctioned sport, so they're allowed to play. But when they get to high school, there's no competition for them. I do have some friends who played back in the day on the East Coast. I don't know if that's still the same. And I think each state has its own sanction and its own rules. So in Colorado, boys are not allowed to play in high school. And we have a fantastic coach here, Paul Lewis, who played in the USA men's team. He's doing a wonderful job with boys. And he and I talked about it, saying, can we, if he's producing all these great male field hockey players, how about, and he even offered, he said, they're not going to play for my school. Maybe we can divvy them out. So every school he has one, and we took that to our high school association, but they just vetoed it straight away. There's such limited opportunities for them, and I feel. I mean, I know a couple of the US guys, they play overseas. So they play and they start it and they're good at it. And we encourage, and nearly every year I usually have 2 or 3 boys play in my middle school team. So either year 7 or year 8 team. But then they have to stop. They can't play. They're not allowed to play in high school. And then at college, there is no men's field hockey as a sport. It doesn't
Yeah.
exist.
In
That's
when we're talking again, yeah, when we're talking again from a European perspective, but also from a South American perspective or an Australian perspective, one of the key elements we always talk about is we need to keep hockey an Olympic sport because that is important for us. I guess in the US that's not important at all. It's about keeping the hockey in the college system. Is there a way? Do you think there is a way to get boys hockey or men's hockey into that college system, or is this a lost battle from the beginning?
here to be a hard one because we have so many rules that go along with what can become a college sport, and one of them is Title IX. That oh, sorry, I'm just reading Jennifer's comment there. Boys are allowed to play field hockey on girls' team that the governing body wants to get a boys. Oh, that's awesome. That's really strong. Um, and then it's just finding the number to have something like that here. We'd have to get just keep building your boys' numbers. So our boys just sort of play in a rec league or some adult sort of fun competition. But it's so there's Title IX, which basically is saying for equality, gender equality, for because there used to be too many boys sports and not enough girls sport. So every boys sport there has to be a girls sport. So the only way a college could potentially initiate a boys field hockey as a sport would be if they had more girls sports, and then they could slip in a boys sport and keep the numbers. But then you couldn't just if it'd take a whole conference. So our college system is set into conferences, and so it'd take a whole conference to agree to have field hockey for boys, a men's field hockey team, so they would have some competition. Because I'm thinking if let's say our college here with let's say one of our universities said yes, we're gonna add this as a boys sport, but then they have no competition because no one else. So it's
Well, why? Because I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think a sport like lacrosse, which is a big sport in certain Anglo-Saxon countries, but not at all. If you look at it, well, from my perspective, worldwide, that is a
correct.
sport that's being played at that level,
Yeah,
and not an Olympic sport.
correct.
Would it be
Correct.
possible to replace lacrosse? Is that even a possibility, or is it just about the tradition?
I think it's a tradition. You would get too much pushback. I don't think lacrosse players would buy into
Yeah,
it. I don't think the
I can
colleges would
imagine.
buy into it. Yeah, exactly. It's but it is interesting. And when I send out video quite a lot to my parents, and particularly if I'm doing a camp or something, I'll throw out lots, and I include 1 or 2 of men's games, and they all come back going, I never knew men played. And the last Olympics, we have lots of TVs on in our department, in our buildings, and we had lots on for the Olympics. And I had so many friends say, "Oh my gosh, I watched men's hockey is amazing." And I'm like, "Yes, it is. Like
Yeah.
it's really cool." And they were keen. Like they said, if we could do it, we would actually probably maybe go and try this sport out. But just no avenues. And I don't. Yeah, it's such a bigger picture. And I even to the point where USA field hockey is a separate entity to the college. So the NCAA, the National Collegiate Athletic Association, so that's who runs our college system. So, for example, we had an issue, well, we're constantly having discussions about how many international athletes should be able to come and play in the collegiate system. And so when I talk to USA Field Hockey about it, they go, it's out of our hands. We can't do anything about it, even though that's the governing body of our sport. They can't interfere with what the Collegiate Athletic Association says. So trying to get men's sport to happen, I mean, as Jennifer said, that's amazing in Massachusetts. I mean, if that can happen, that we can have a 7v7 boys comp, and maybe that's where it has to start. You have these small little competitions, and then it starts to build. I mean, it's with everything. How do you start something, or how do you grow something?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Allow one last comment here from Janet for to close up because we're already way past the hour mark here. But I think this is also an important topic. She's also claiming about there's a burnout once your girls finish college, and many of the D1 players who aren't in the national team don't continue to play even if there are local opportunities because of that burnout. Is that something typical to the American setup? Or
I think
because we also have a little bit of a burnout here in Europe of youth players. Well, it's not so much of burnout. It's our problem is when youth players go to college and there are so many other activities that they forget about hockey and go and do other stuff. Uh, but here it is after college, then usually they come back to hockey. But that is not a
yeah,
possibility.
not it's not a possibility. And Jennifer's so correct because I've witnessed it with some of the girls who come to coach for me or that I've met along the way, and I've worked enough college camps to kind of explore and see what that system is. And those girls, it is intense. Even in their summers, the work that they have to do, I'm impressed. The thing, what's kind of sad is with some of these girls, the fierceness and the competitive nature of our American athletes. We just had an indoor tournament with our club, an adult thing the other day. The American girls who stepped up, they know how to play with their heart. They work so damn hard. I was like, I'm impressed. I'm so impressed. And so it's sad that, and that's the ethos that goes with their college. So that's what they have to do. I mean, they work bloody hard at college, but they the burnout is real. It is so real. And I have, as I said, there's a lot of girls who have moved to Colorado recently, a lot of young coaches, or young ex D1 players. And they've all sort of said, yeah, we kind of take a year off or 2 years off because that program is intense. And it's 4 years of intensity. Almost all year. I don't know really how much break time they have either, because there's this expectation to maintain a fitness level, and as we know, Americans love their fitness, and that's one of the things they excel at. So, I mean, even my athletes, I've girls who, they've just been recruited to go to college, they'll get sent a packet, and it is pages thick of the work rate that they're supposed to do in their summer vacation before they get to college. Um,
Wow.
yeah, burnout is definitely real, and I think that's something that unless the culture changes at a college level and college coaches realize maybe we don't have to have that intensity and we can still have results, but at the moment that's what they know is how to achieve results. So if something's working, they're not probably going to change it.
Probably not. Probably not now. Um, Allow me the last question, and then we're going to close up here. In Europe, we think the world of us when it comes to hockey. We think we are the best, and we think that the whole of the world should learn from us. Maybe Australia is the exception there, but we're very arrogant in that way. But okay, you've experienced all these cultures, for many years now in the US system. If you can name one thing that a coach could in Europe could learn from coaching in the American way, what would be that? That one thing.
Oh, um,
Putting you on the spot there, but
yeah, that's okay. I mean, from a coach's perspective,
from a coach's perspective.
self self knowledge and self awareness,
Mm.
and the education piece. So really challenge who you are, because you're right. Like, we do think we know it all, and we have. And I definitely was like that when I came to the United States, going, "Phew, what do you know? What do
Yeah.
you know?" But actually stopping, just reflecting, and knowing that if whether it's your job or not, it's still your job. Even if you're doing it as a volunteer, you do it as best you can. And so having that self knowledge, to then become better and to constantly aim to be a better coach or a better person. I think the Americans do that very well.
I think that's a very good one to close off for. So, uh, Veronica, thanks very much for all of your time here and for sharing your insights and your knowledge with us. I think that was very insightful for those who are not so familiar with the US system. Um, uh, One last comment here from Helen here. Thanks, Veronica. See you soon online. You can only coach others. You can only coach others if you can coach yourself. A quote by a famous Dutch soccer player, Johan Cruyff. Probably, in our belief, the best soccer player ever that lived ever, or maybe even the best, one of the best coaches that even was in a team sport. So thanks for sharing the time with us, and it was very cool to learn from that American perspective, even from through Australian eyes, and with some European background there as well. So that was very interesting, and. For the coaches still out there, thanks very much. We are back with another masterclass, not next week, but in 2 weeks. And until then, thank you very much and see you soon. Bye bye.
Awesome.